Alright, so normally I like to start my videos off with bubbles, to lighten the mood. However, there's really no way to lighten a mood about what we're going to be discussing today. It's actually going to get really dark and really graphic, so if issues of violent crime, a particular type of violent crime, aren't your thing, here's your chance to go find another video to watch or go play a game or something. So if you're not familiar with me or with my content, I go by the handle EgoDram. I'm an artist, sometimes a poet, art commentator, but I'm also a US military veteran. In 2020, a particularly grievous crime happened at Fort Hood, Texas, now called Fort Cavazos, and recently one of the perpetrators of the crime, Miss Cecily Aguilar, was sentenced to the maximum sentence of 30 years for her role in attempting to destroy evidence, remains, giving false statements to police, and other such things. To clear up some misconceptions in conversations that I've had with other civilians and other veterans as to why she wasn't charged under the UCMJ, first of all, she's a civilian. She was the spouse of another service member who hooked up with the actual... I've talked on TikTok about how common things like swinging and polyamory actually are in the US military. However, from what I've been able to gather, Ms. Aguilar and Robinson's situation doesn't appear to be that. Civilians are not beholden to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is basically its own set of regulations and laws that apply to service members across all branches and across all ranks, at least in theory. After Ms. Guillen's remains were found, leadership at Fort Cavazos faced intense amount of scrutiny, and some of which were deposed and replaced with new leaders. It should not have had to take national news media coverage for the US military to do what they were supposed to have been doing all along, and that was investigating the situation and holding the perpetrators to account. And the fact that it took that to get them to that point, they should be embarrassed. They deserve to be embarrassed. But here's the thing. While I am glad that the perpetrators of Ms. Guillen's are dealt with, even though the actual and heroed himself, there's another situation that you might not be aware of that's nearly identical to it and isn't getting anywhere near as much discussion and coverage as it really deserves.
Tonight, we're sitting down with the family of a Fort Stewart soldier who died overseas. WJCL 22 News' Emma Hamilton joins us now live in the studio tonight. And Emma, you've been investigating this for months now.
Yeah, Shannon, I have. According to a final report that was issued by the United States Army, Specialist Denise Montgomery Smith took her own life by hanging on August 9th, 2022 while deployed in Germany. But her family tells me that they question that because an initial report immediately following her death reached different conclusions regarding the circumstances around her death. For example, in an altercation just weeks prior to when she was found dead, she was assaulted by fellow soldiers, according to the initial report. The initial report also says that her leadership didn't know of any behavioral health issues. The family says they just want answers and justice to make sure that this doesn't happen to anyone else.
Essentially, what it boils down to is the fact that she reported being by multiple people. There was a video of it. I don't recommend going to look for it. It's actually pretty heinous. And her unit at Fort Stewart, Georgia, still decided to bury it. One day, Denise Montgomery Smith was found suspended from the ceiling of her barracks room, to put it as PG-13 as I possibly can. The findings from the final report out of Fort Stewart versus the initial findings brazenly conflicted with each other, and all of the evidence according to the video and statements by family. I find it really strange that the night of the facility cameras were switched off by accident, so nobody could see who came in or out of her barracks room. Also, the eagerness to blame mental health or behavioral health issues on marital troubles when her own husband actually came forward and said, "No, I supported my wife and I was really looking forward to her coming home. And she was excited to come home too." No, there were no marital issues between the two of them. And he has come out and said as such, but the Army swears otherwise. This was all just so tragic. The fact that there was another almost identical situation to Ms. Guillen's out of Fort Cavazos, ongoing now out of Fort Stewart, Georgia, tells me something that I pretty much knew all along. The reason why these situations keep happening and are going to keep happening, these assaults, these cover-ups are going to keep happening, is because there is a realm within senior leadership of the US military that thinks that this is completely okay, and they're fine with it. Have you guys ever heard of a documentary called The Invisible War? It came out in 2012 and details situations like this and that they keep happening and just how horrendous the situation really is. Like I said, that came out in 2012 and it's now 2023, and these corrupt and incompetent unit commanders are still doing exactly what the documentary points out time and time again, and they think that we're stupid. And they sincerely seem to believe that they're not doing anything wrong. There is no way, especially after that documentary came out, there is no way they don't know what they're doing. Like I said earlier, it should not have had to take massive media, international embarrassment for them to do what they are supposed to be doing all along. And I know what you're thinking. There are rules about retaliation and standards to uphold and rules and regulations and investigations and procedures that are supposed to follow. This keeps happening because they are fine with it. They don't see a problem. They don't think that this behavior is wrong. They would rather spare themselves public embarrassment by doing things worthy of public embarrassment and just making them worse. This is happening, it's been happening, and it's going to keep happening because they are okay with it. Case in point. This document is called a policy letter. This policy letter in particular was issued by my commanding officer, detailing a direct order with instructions and guidelines of what to do if a particular situation should arise. This is the direct order that my commanding officer actively chose to disobey when I tried to report my assault directly to his face. When I was deployed, word got out that I had made a friend. Again, I've discussed how common polyamory and swinging are in the US military. This friend happened to outrank me. Just because it's against the rules doesn't necessarily mean it's morally wrong. That night, a male soldier forced his way into my room, grabbed the right side of my head, slammed the left side of my head into a piece of furniture to incapacitate me. And when I eventually came to my senses, I don't know how long I was down. When I came to my senses, he was trying to get on top of me. The only reason he stopped and got off of me was because his dumbass left the door open and my NCOIC happened to walk by and see what he was doing. I was interrogated, not allowed to go seek medical treatment for my injuries. This went on for months. See the date on this policy letter? This was issued two, maybe 3 weeks after the incident happened. When my commanding officer eventually came to Fob Warhorse to deal with me, I looked him square in the eyes, stood 4 feet in front of him, looked him square in the eyes, told him everything about my head being shoved into the piece of furniture, about the stalking, about the harassment, about the comments and the propositions and all of it. And he literally sat there with a blank expression in his eyes and did absolutely nothing. Do you have any idea how humiliating and horrifying it is to look directly in the face of someone you're supposed to be able to trust with your life and knowing full well that they are incapable of empathy, and knowing and realizing that they are completely fine with everything that was done to you? But this was a direct order from his superior's superior. There's a really harsh policy with very clear rules. Ink on paper. That's all it was. Don't you know that President Joe Biden recently made a specific crime under the UCMJ? Cool, good for him. It's a band-aid over a bullet wound as far as I'm concerned. Because none of the harshest rules or policies or big public grandstands or speeches amount to jack and or all anything if you're not actually enforcing them. And this isn't a recent phenomena either. Google the name Lavina Johnson. Google the word tailhook. Google the term Marines United. This has been going on for entirely too damn long. It's still going on now, and it's going to keep going on because they are 1000% fine with it. This is all just hypothetical and speculative here, but I wonder if someone who is completely fine with letting an assault go unpunished would feel the same way if someone did that to a member of their own family. Yeah, Frankie, I f***ing went there. Oh, does that make you uncomfortable? So if you're a service member and you find yourself in a similar situation where your command isn't doing anything or they are retaliating against you or punishing you, since apparently mass humiliation is what it takes for the military to do what they say they do anyway, don't bother threatening to go to your congressman or to a reporter, just do it. Email, write, get your family and friends to do the same thing. And don't forget to document absolutely everything that you possibly can. Make notes, make recordings if you can, and send those along to your congressman or your journalists too. I just feel like someone in a position of leadership who has to break the law in the interest of doing their job, especially if it involves committing a federal crime, is not very good at that job in the first place, obviously, but definitely shouldn't have it. This is not going to stop unless we, the public, stop it. What you allow to continue, you condone.